me, the story of TIS started a little earlier than the famous 3rd October. Each time I look back vis-a-vis where we are now, I always see the awesomeness of God's hand on TIS. Once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the late Mr. Chairman for what you have allowed the good Lord to do through you. Long live TIS, and may God bless us all.
Teachers must have the passion to guide the development and learning of their students. They must love children. Just as each student is different, so is each day for a teacher. And that is what I call the teaching guarantee. Once a teacher, always a teacher. Happy 15th anniversary, Tema International School.
My mummy, your mummy, our mummy. Fellow students, staff, and members of the TIS body, please aid me in welcoming our founder, Mrs. Comforts Ajo Ajabon.
I can't believe that Tema International School is 15 years old. We have pushed the boundaries of achievements in international education in Ghana, and we will continue to do so. God bless TIS. God bless us all. Thank you.
Life is beautiful. I'm thankful to be one of the pioneer love of TIS, along with all of my friends.
But now there's so many resources for you to improve yourselves and even do much better than we did.
Where are my Francis boys?
On that fateful day, 17th of October, 1998, after having the documents from TDC, I went to the land. There was a boulder there. I sat on it and shed tears of joy. I have prayed that the schools should succeed. I believe it has succeeded. I believe so strongly.
It gives me great pride to know that we have produced over 500 graduates that are impacting or having a positive impact in society. The founders had a dream that this school was not going to be for the Oxford goers, the Cambridge goers alone. They wanted the school to be a home away from home.
The world is large, but it's becoming smaller. So the idea is to give our young people here as much exposure as possible, so that we want them to be universal, we want them to be international minded, so that they see the world in a certain place where we never had.
Tema International School aims to be the international school of choice, producing or nurturing world-class citizens who will make a difference to the world, make it a better place.
As a parent, I would want to say that I have seen a progressive developmental institutional investment program, and I think it's worth its while.
TIS carries you along. They take you, help you, encourage you, take you to the next level.
TIS is the right place to go if you want to progress.
The best thing you ever experienced, and it'll be the most amazing time of your life.
If they are looking for a boarding school, to be exact, I recommend this school because everyone is welcoming and the school itself is welcoming and you feel safe here. I get a feeling of family.
TIS, we are a family school with a sense of community to make sure that our students become world-class citizens.
TIS has been, is, and honestly forever will be my home.
Big thank you to everyone in the TIS community for supporting TIS in its 15 years journey. Watch out for the lineup of activities come October 2018, where we celebrate our 15 years of existence. We may be requiring parent support in terms of sponsorship, in terms of commitment, because there will be a lot of work that would have to be put in to ensure that the anniversary celebrations are successful. I'm counting on staff support, I'm counting on student commitment, and I'm counting on the entire TIS community, friends of the school, parents of the school, and everyone to support us in every way they can to ensure that we have a successful 15 years celebration. Thank you.
For me, the story of TIS started a little earlier than the famous 3rd October. Each time I look back vis-a-vis where we are now, I always see the awesomeness of God's hand on TIS. Once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the late Mr. Chairman for what you have allowed the good Lord to do through you. Long live TIS, and may God bless us all.
Teachers must have the passion to guide the development and learning of their students. They must love children. Just as each student is different, so is each day for a teacher. And that is what I call the teaching guarantee. Once a teacher, always a teacher. Happy 15th anniversary, Tema International School.
My mummy, your mummy, our mummy. Fellow students, staff, and members of the TIS body, please aid me in welcoming our founder, Mrs. Comforts Ajo Ajabon.
I can't believe that Tema International School is 15 years old. We have pushed the boundaries of achievements in international education in Ghana, and we will continue to do so. God bless TIS. God bless us all. Thank you.
Life is beautiful. I'm thankful to be one of the pioneer love of TIS, along with all of my friends.
But now there's so many resources for you to improve yourselves and even do much better than we did.
Where are my Francis boys?
On that fateful day, 17th of October, 1998, after having the documents from TDC, I went to the land. There was a boulder there. I sat on it and shed tears of joy. I prayed that the school should succeed. I believe it has succeeded. I believe so strongly.
It gives me great pride to know that we have produced over 500 graduates that are impacting or having a positive impact in society. The founders had a dream that this school was not going to be for the Oxford goers, the Cambridge goers alone. They wanted the school to be a home away from home.
The world is large, but it's becoming smaller. So the idea is to give our young people here as much exposure as possible, so that we want them to be universal, we want them to be international minded, so that they see the world in a certain place where we never had.
Tema International School aims to be the international school of choice, producing or nurturing world-class citizens who will make a difference to the world, make it a better place.
As a parent, I would want to say that I have seen a progressive developmental institutional investment program, and I think it's worth its while.
TIS carries you along. They take you, help you, encourage you, take you to the next level.
TIS is the right place to go if you want to progress.
The best thing you ever experience, and it'll be the most amazing time of your life.
If they are looking for a boarding school, to be exact, I recommend this school because everyone is welcoming and the school itself is welcoming and you feel safe here. I get a feeling of family.
TIS, we are a family school with a sense of community to make sure that our students become world-class citizens.
TIS has been, is, and honestly forever will be my home.
Big thank you to everyone in the TIS community for supporting TIS in its 15 years journey. Watch out for the lineup of activities come October 2018, where we celebrate our 15 years of existence. We may be requiring parent support in terms of sponsorship, in terms of commitment, because there will be a lot of work that would have to be put in to ensure that the anniversary celebrations are successful. I'm counting on staff support, I'm counting on student commitment, and I'm counting on the entire TIS community.
Throughout the year. Now this allows them to partner with schools and organizations in our community. And one such partner school is the Calvary Presbyterian School. Here, our students have been involved in areas ranging from the organizing of a book bank to running a girls' fitness club. To kick off the program today, we are blessed to have some students from the Calvary Presbyterian School to stun us with a wonderful performance. So with a round of applause, shall we please invite them?
yele todo nyakale onye a beton punu abeton onye a beton punu abeton yele todo nyaka ele anse onam oh ye a beton punu abeton punu mase odon lale todo pe ala todo oh no mase abeton nyakale oh beton punu na mia dukana mia dro agbade ototo anda chia na mia nwe o mia dro agbade oh Moses, Moses. Kanan yadu agbadi awato na mianwe o Mose Mose lo Israel yo e Kanan yedo Kanan agbadi awato na mianwe o na miadu Kanan yadu agbadi atutu adacha na mianwe o na miadu Kanan yadu agbade atutu adacha na mianwe o Mose Mose la Israel ye Kanan na miadu Kanan yadu agbade awato na mianwe o Mose Mose la Israel yo e Kanan emedu Kanan yadu agbadi awato na mianwe o the Son of God is coming again and the people say hallelujah. The Son of God is coming again, and the people say, Hallelujah.
That was a lovely performance by the Calvary Presby School. I guess you can all see how much we love working with them and why. Now I'd like to invite a pillar of the TIS community, a person who is very committed to ensuring the well-being of students and always pushes us to achieve our personal best in every area. He is the principal of TIS, but beyond this, he is also a friend and a father figure to most of us here. With a round of applause, shall we invite the principal, Dr. Ken Darvo.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this most important event to start the week off of our 15th anniversary celebrations. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. The theme for our 15th anniversary celebrations is reflecting on our journey and inspiring new directions. Last week at our special assembly, we enjoyed the reflections of our pioneers, and what a lovely nostalgic assembly it was. It was beautiful to see the pioneering staff, our parents, pioneering students, our alumni come along and join us on that special day. We changed direction today, because today is a discussion on what school education may hold for us in 15 years' time. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank our very distinguished panellists, guest speakers, for joining us today on what seemed like a nice day earlier on. Then we had a bit of rain, and then we had the blue sky again, and now we've got a bit more rain coming back. But thank you for giving up your valuable time. We appreciate it very much. Do you know that TIS has had a foot into the future over the past 2 years? Cognity, the digital textbooks that we use, provides an opportunity for our students to personalise their learning. Our online admissions system that we use for the past 2 years, and this year we've used online testing, with results available within 5 minutes of the testing, in which to proceed with interviews and provide valuable feedback on what the strengths of a student may be, and also predicting future scores in their MYP and DP exams. We are, as you know, an SAT and ACT centre. This year, ACT has introduced computer-based exams. 3 weeks ago, I think, we were one of the centres that were able to successfully complete that testing, and at special request of ACT, we had to provide another backup day for those across Ghana and neighbouring countries who were unable to complete that online exam due to issues at their own home centre. I love this quote from and so yet technology is playing such a key role in all these changes. But a most important question to me is, how will AI, artificial intelligence, change schools, teaching and learning in years to come. I love this quote from Anthony Chavetta, a high school student in Missouri, USA. "The need to know the capital of Florida died when my phone learned the answer. Rather, the students of tomorrow need to be able to think creatively. They will need to learn on their own and adapt new challenges and find new solutions, and also innovate on the fly." In my opinion, education and health are the top two priorities that any country should have. Disappointingly, education is getting too many headlines for the wrong reasons in Ghana, with its recently introduced double tracking system for its senior high schools. Oh dear, what a mess. I feel sorry for those students who will experience this year. Yet being bold and innovative can improve the big hole that the education department or government has dug itself into. 3 solutions in 3 words: Pomoja, Cognity, and vouchers. Today is about predictions, so I'd like to join the bandwagon with 3 pertinent to TIS. First, I predict Eric in grade 10. Where are you, Eric? Eric in grade 10, up in the corner there. I predict Eric will be the first TIS student to take a diploma program course at TIS that is not offered here at TIS, but offered online with Pomoja. Second, when our first group of MYP students complete assessments in May 2020, following successful verification in November, parents will begin to appreciate the importance of children being able to demonstrate conceptual understanding on learning and preparation for an unknown future, instead of chew and pour that promotes cramming and relies on memorization. Third, I predict that our astute moderator will be principal of TIS in 15 years. I've witnessed Kwasi in action, and I like what I see in terms of his educational leadership potential and his passion for education. Now, a word of caution to our guest speaker and our panellists. There are 2 very distinguished former educational leaders sitting in the front row, seats 3 and 4. In Mrs. Comfort Ajivon and Dr. Mrs. Sylvia Boy, both original pioneers of TIS who still play a very active role in TIS today. They are tough judges with high expectations. Impress them today and you will win the audience. Once a teacher, always a teacher. So if you want to know about your performance this afternoon, both will be happy to provide you with articulate feedback. Kwasi, it's time to get this exciting forum, to get down to the nitty-gritty. Thank you. I know you will all enjoy what will follow.
Thank you, Dr. Ken. We can always count on you to give us insightful words. Now, before we move into the most important part of the event, the educational forum, which will be led by a moderator who's also an alumni of TIS, we will invite Davina Yosin, one of the leaders of our Inside TV team, and she'll also star as Belle in the TIS adaptation of The Beauty and the Beast. To introduce the moderator for today.
A Columbia graduate, a director of learning at Moringa School, a financial analyst for Goldman Sachs. These are just 3 achievements our next speaker can boast of, but doesn't. From his training as an Anthony boy, he learned that modesty is key. I'm sure this was a hard lesson to learn, as he was part of the astounding Blue Cedar. After attaining his Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology and Business Management, he didn't only teach debate, public speaking skills, and mathematics in middle and high schools as part of Youth for Debate, which is a public speaking building organization in New York City, but he also worked in the African Leadership University in Mauritius and Johannesburg, South Africa. He spent 4 years involving himself in many aspects of the university's development, from admissions to faculty recruiting to learning model design. As a learning experience designer, his professional passions span education design, mentoring, and engagement with Pan-African culture. Outside of work, he loves to spend his time reading and even writing science fiction novels, and is obsessed with anything related to Afrofuturist thought. With an enthusiastic round of applause, shall we invite our treasured 2009 alumnus, Mr. Kwesi Adidako.
Good afternoon. Hello, can you hear me? Kind of. Good afternoon. It's good to see everyone here today. As the students who just came before just mentioned, my name is Kwesi Adidako, and I graduated from TIS in 2009. And I'm so happy to be back. It's actually surreal to see how much the school has grown over the last 15 years. Now, before I move into opening up the education forum, I just wanted to share a little bit about my time while I was at TIS and the kind of impacts that it's had on me to date. I think the first and most important thing that I want to get out of the way is that it sounds corny, almost. Even in my mind, as I'm thinking about it, it sounds like something that is terribly cliched, but the truth is that a lot of the lessons that I learned from my classes here were some of the most impactful lessons that I learned for the rest of my life. In my classes with Mrs. Thank you, Mama Sue. I always appreciate you. In my classes with Mrs. Ferguson's history class, I remember I took... I see she's still going strong. That's good. I took higher level history, and it was by far my favorite subject while I was here, because HL history was one of the first times where I interacted with African history in a deep way, and African history from different African contexts. And since I graduated from university, I've lived in 3 different African countries, and I'm hoping to live in more. And a lot of that curiosity really started at that time in Mrs. Ferguson's class, because every time I would go to her to ask questions, she always had answers for me, or she always had resources to push me towards something that I would be able to explore more. My time in Johannesburg, in South Africa, in Mauritius, and now in Kenya has been greatly influenced by this. My second big love was born out of, at the time, Miss Bailadong and over time, Miss Corrier's English literature class. Those classes kind of stoked a lot of those fires for the love of reading and the love of writing that has continued to be existent in my life. I feel like at the times when I'm most stressed, at the times when work is, it's starting to get me down, being able to retreat and put words down that may not make sense to anyone else but make me happy are some of the most important things to me. Because then my ability to share those with the people that I love who are around me then allows me to connect with them in a way that I wouldn't ordinarily do. So thank you, Ms. Correa and Ms. Bailadong. finally, was Mr. Trumper's theory of knowledge class. Now, most of you here might not know who Mr. Trumper is, but because he might have left before your time. But theory of knowledge, for those of you who are doing IB, which is all of you, should not be underrated. The theory of knowledge class really laid the philosophical groundwork for a lot of the value systems that I have in my life right now, as I'm standing here today. Before TOK, I didn't know that I could ask some of the questions that I could ask about life, about the meaning of existence, about the reason why anything should happen. And I feel like those kind of questions are what influenced me to move from finance into education very early on, about a year into my career, and I've never looked back since. This is all just to say, the IB program is an incredible one, and don't underestimate the power that it has. Now, before we move into the education forum, there are a few acknowledgements that we must make, of course, because there are some very, very distinguished guests among us. I know they've been called out, but I would not be doing my work if I did not acknowledge Mrs. Ajavon and Mrs. Boy sitting in the front row over here. And apologies, this is probably going to happen to you a lot today. Because all of us sitting here are because of the work that you put in from the beginning. You have both been educators for a long time, and as an aspiring educator, it's inspiring to see the kind of cathedral that you are building here, because the truth about cathedral building is that it takes several generations to make something happen. We are here celebrating that TIS is 15 years old. I can't even imagine what it's going to look like in 50 years, in 100 years. Having the two of you, among others, diligently attending all events, regardless of how busy your schedules were, making sure that everything is going right, is really inspiring to some of us who want to grow up in education. So I'm grateful to you. All right, so now that we've taken a nice walk down memory lane, let's bring things back to the present. We are here today for an education forum where we want to think about what the future of education looks like. TIS has been around for 15 years. We want to ask ourselves the question, in the next 15 years, in 2033, if my math is correct, and I know it is because it was in the brochure. In 2033, what is education going to look like? What are the relationships between the private and the public sector? What role is technology going to play? What are the new ways we can think about training our teachers and educators to be better support for the students we have among us? These are some of the questions that we want to explore. So, to kick that off, I'd like to invite up our keynote speaker. Before telling you about this keynote speaker, the organization that she represents, Untitled International School, ARIS for short, is actually a twin of Tema International School because they are also in their 15th year. So can we please just give some appreciation to ARIS? Now, as the mother of this twin, our keynote speaker is a medical doctor and public health practitioner by training, specialized in women and children's development. She's been involved in more than 15 years of developing and managing educational and health programs focused specifically on women and children. Now, a lot of her work has also focused on people dealing with child labor or armed conflict issues in Africa and the Middle East, which means that her training makes her an incredible... Oh, you can hear me now. Could you hear me this whole time? Okay, I'm glad. Her training makes her an incredibly well-rounded educational leader. She's also a United Nations officer and a consultant on the development of early childhood development programs. Now, personally, early childhood development, people who work in early childhood development are some of the people I admire the most because they are dealing with human beings that they are most malleable. And I think it's a very challenging area of work to be in. Under her leadership, Untitled International School has been approved as a Cambridge International School and IB World School, offering primary years and diploma programs. At that school, she's building a safe, productive, and caring community for all the students, including her 3 children who attend the school now. Now, it is my utmost honor to present Dr. Fatma Odaimat.
definitely an honor to be here with you today. So esteemed Board of Directors, TIS Management and Community, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Please let me begin by congratulating you all. You are here with us today because it means that every one of you has had played a role in the journey of Tema International School. Today, TIS at 15 is one of the leading schools in Ghana because of every one of you. And it's definitely an honor, as I said, to be sharing this day with you. So for that, I believe you all deserve a big round of applause. In his letter, Dr. Ken Darval writes that there's a global shortage of teachers, believe it or not. But for me, it's no wonder. When I reflect back on my school years, I can definitely vouch that on my graduation day, my friends and I couldn't wait to get out of school. We hated it, and we were definitely not planning on coming back ever. I was actually a very good student who respected all the rules, and I worked very hard to get myself into medical school. To everybody around me and to my school, I was a success story. But inside, I was a very unhappy person. I had very low self-esteem, non-existent life skills. I wasn't happy with my career choice, and I was not ready to face the world. So I had to learn everything the hard way, through real-life experiences, and I had to make all the mistakes necessary to be where I am today. My school taught me to be a passive learner who was required to do exactly what the teachers instructed, and whose knowledge mainly focused on the set of books that were given to us every year. In our days, computers were not available in schools, and tablets and smartphones did not yet exist. It was only later in my career and life that I understood the concept of being an independent, lifelong learner, and developed an endless passion and love for learning. It took me 15 years to realize that my true passion and purpose in life is actually education. I knew very early on that I wanted to work with children, but I never imagined I was going to end up in an institution that gave me nightmares and ulcers. So what makes school such an exciting place to work for today? Why am I where I am right now? I believe my passion for and interest in education very much stems from the rapid changes and the increased complexity of today's classroom. There's a growing awareness of the necessity to change and improve the preparation of students to function in a continually changing and highly demanding environment and world. We are no more interested in the education of the mass, but emphasize on the education and development of the individual student. We want to harness the potential of every single student. In the classroom today, we are adapting constantly to different student characteristics by using diverse methodologies in teaching and learning. We also adapt to the different ability levels, to the different learning styles, to the different personality characteristics, and even cultural backgrounds. We review our curriculum to develop interdisciplinary units that enable students to acquire knowledge from different disciplines without having to separate the subjects. So in primary school and a PYP school, we don't have subjects. It's a whole unit, and all the subjects come together to make sense, so that for the child to construct meaning. We are rethinking the whole design and architecture of this learning environment and challenging all the known practices. In some schools, timetables do not exist anymore, and students are leading their own learning. Our focus has shifted from the books and the teacher to the students, who are no more called teachers, but facilitators. We are focusing on and connecting to every student while also helping every student make sense of the role in this global village, because the world is a global village. We are getting them ready for a future that is unclear to us, for jobs that do not yet exist. These are exciting times indeed, but to many of us, they are quite scary. Today, we are witnessing a huge transformation in education because of a human creation. Can you guess what it is? Technology. New species of technologies are being born daily, evolving at a blinding rate, and each new technology becomes a tool to create other new technologies. The invention of the computer alone has helped us build astonishing new tools, from smartphones to spaceships to robotic surgeons. We are witnessing a burst of innovation that is happening faster than our minds can comprehend. We are also witnessing the fusion between the human species and the world of technology. And if you don't believe me, look at how many of us are holding smartphones right now. Some of us who have, hearing aids. Some of us who have chips on our heart to help us beat, to help our heart beat. So there's a complete fusion of both species. We are now perched on the cusp of history. We are in transition, and the world feels like it's been turned upside down, and nothing is quite as we have imagined. But uncertainty is always precursor to sweeping change. Transformation is always preceded by confusion and fear. Exactly 21 years ago, on May 11, 1997, can anybody guess what happened on that day? The great chess champion, Grandmaster, Garry Kasparov, can we remember what happened on that day? Does anybody know? This is actually important human history. The Grandmaster, Garry Kasparov, became the first chess world champion to lose a match to a supercomputer, IBM's Deep Blue. This was highly publicized media, and when he lost, it shocked the whole world. How could a computer beat a Grandmaster? Kasparov was very skeptical about the supercomputer and the engineers that actually created it. But throughout the years, he moved on to deep reflection, and he wrote a book entitled Deep Thinking, Where Machine Intelligence Ends and Human Creativity Begins. What makes his book fascinating is that he uses it to reflect on what it was like to have been defeated by a machine, and on the general implication of that experience for the human species. Kasparov's book served as the perfect antidote of the prevailing gloom and doom narratives in modern writing, because, when we write about artificial intelligence, because we are all scared that eventually, computers will eradicate the human being. It will challenge us all, and it will rule the world. But Kasparov actually shows hope, rational optimism, and describes a future in which we won't be racing against the machine, but actually running alongside them and benefiting in the process. We'll actually be living in a symbiotic relationship with these machines, and I think that makes sense to our biology majors. I was especially inspired by one statement he makes in his book. According to Kasparov, education is too important not to take risks. Usually we tend to, separate schools and risks, but actually, in these times, education is too important not to take risks. He greatly stresses on adaptation to constant change, resiliency, and risk-taking. These, I believe, are the characteristics that should be at the heart of every school culture in the coming 15 years. With you all today, I share Kasparov's wisdom. According to him, the willingness to keep trying new things, different methods, uncomfortable tasks when you are already an expert at something, because a lot of us are experts at what we're doing. But to try different things will separate good from great. Focusing on your strengths is required for peak performance, but improving your weaknesses has the potential for the greatest gains. This is true for athletes, executive, organization, and entire companies. This is especially true for institutions that are shaping the future by educating the children of today and the leaders of tomorrow. Leaving your comfort zone definitely involves risks, and when you are already doing well, the temptation to stick to the status quo can be overwhelming. But this eventually can only lead to stagnation. Much like looking over the chessboard and pondering on the wisdom of our next move, we cannot be frozen into inaction because of our fear. We must be willing to make that next move, despite the risks, and make another move, and another. And then we must learn from our experiences, and especially from our mistakes. And those who believe that schools don't do mistakes, then I don't think you're being very realistic. Part of our learning journey is all the time learning from our mistakes. If we hope to prosper, we need to learn from our mistakes. Kasparov concludes in his closing chapter, to keep ahead of the machines, we must not try to slow them down, because that slows us down as well. We must speed them up. We must give them and ourselves plenty of room to grow. We must go forward, outwards, and upwards. This is definitely a wise advice from the greatest of all grandmasters. With all that innovation and creativity that excites the human mind, another important focus for schools is the human heart. The young generations of today have a great responsibility to ensure that the world becomes a full and better world for all of us. But this can only become a reality if we pay attention to the education of the heart by teaching and modeling love, compassion, justice, forgiveness, mindfulness, tolerance, and peace. I urge you to place your faith in the human capacity for innovation and love, because these two factors, when united, possess the power to change the world and illuminate any darkness. As we move to an undefined tomorrow, schools need to inspire and empower students and staff, and even parents and families, to transform into something greater that can yet be imagined, with power beyond our wildest dreams. And as we do, may we never forget that with the wisdom of Churchill, who warned us, the price of greatness is responsibility. Our students hold in their hands the future of our world, the responsibility of creating a better world for all of us, and they should be reminded of that responsibility constantly. My final message to you today, and it has been inspired by the book called Origins, as the future unfolds in front of us all, may our minds and spirits keep pace with our technologies. May our compassion keep pace with our powers. And may love, not fear, be the engine of change. Happy birthday, TIS. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fatma, for those inspiring words. I think when I think about technology, especially in education, there's always so much fear associated with those two coming together. Because what does that mean for the jobs of our teachers? What does that mean for how well our students will actually learn from human beings? But I think one thing that I'm really taking away from you is that technology's advancement is something that we cannot change. Therefore, we have to understand how we embrace it and roll with it in a productive way, rather than kind of trying to grit our teeth and resist it. So thank you so much, Dr. Fatma, for that. Okay, so to break up the flow a little bit, we're going to have a performance. But just before we move into that performance, we just want to acknowledge, in the spirit of technology, yes, we can hear you. You're all good, right? In the spirit of technology, we'd like to just acknowledge some of the media that's in the house with us today. So from television, we have GTV, UTV, Joy News, TV3, GH1, and Metro TV. Smile, everyone, you're on TV. From radio, we have Joy FM, City FM, Peace FM, Star FM, and Adom FM. And finally, from print, we have Daily Graphic, The Ghanaian Times, Daily Ghana, Junior Graphic, The Mirror, and The Finder. So big shout out to the team behind the scenes doing the work to bring all these media houses here. I don't think we ever thought TIS would be here today. Thank you so much. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome our other sister, our much bigger sister, SOS, in a performance.
One, two.
Hi.
Now is the time. After all these desert digging, sometimes with garden folks, deep ocean diving without oxygen tanks, which at times seemed like planting maize in thorns. But here, we rejoice. Sorry, can I take this again? Now is the time. Instead of all this, sorry, blast them. Now is the time. In spite of all the desert digging, sometimes with garden folks, deep ocean diving without oxygen tanks, which at times seemed like planting maize in thorns. But here we rejoice because of a mission accomplished. We invite our fellow divers who lost their oxygen for no result, our fellow desert diggers who poured out their tears. Now is the time. Balloons sway in the four corners, full of the lost oxygen. Plates with food to revive the energy lost digging, whilst the maize is taking root, awaiting harvest and its sharing. Now is the time. Desert diggers and divers spend quality time with success. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. I would like to pose a question to you all. What do you think school will look like 15 years from now? Now, what do you think school will look like 15 years from now if 15 years ago school looked exactly like this? I believe modern day education is a limitation, a determinant of the next generation, yes, but it lacks integrity and it lacks integration. Why do I say this? What is the point of education? Is it judged by how many theories we can cram into our brain, how many facts we can retain, how many countries we can name, and how much stress we can sustain before we go insane? Our educational system forces one teacher to teach one subject, yet one student to learn all of it, with the promise of good grades, good schools, and good jobs. But really, when the sun goes down, what's the profit if we forget all of it? Just like how we forget that our personas are not defined by grades on paper, but by passion we leave behind. The talents we push aside and the gifts that we discern. I believe that if students have trouble understanding what we teach, then it's about time we start teaching what they want to learn. We acknowledge that we're all different, right? Different hearts, different minds, different brains. So how can we teach different people knowledge that's exactly the same? Same tests, same questions, and expect the same answers. You see, we play the same kind of music, yet we expect different dancers. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for education, but I believe that the modern day problem is misinterpretation. The problem is not the journey, but it is the methodology. Safe to say that our systems owe education an apology. Because I believe in a system of equality between all the subjects, from the arts to the maths. I believe in giving students the opportunity to create their own paths. Because while students might be only 25% of our population, they are by all means 100% of the next generation. So, a school for dreams and not degrees, where grades are not the centerpiece, where it's not the hype and it's not the fees, but it's a place where a mind can find release. Thank you.
It's not about the degrees, it's how we can find the right Yo, well done. Well done. Well done, well done. All right. I think that's gotten us all in the right spirit to have a really good discussion about education. I think a lot of the topics that we want to discuss, our young sister has actually raised in her beautiful poem. Just before we get into things though, because I'm moderating this panel, I will unfortunately not have the opportunity to share my thoughts on some of these issues. So I thought before we go into it, I'll just take a minute and just let you know what I think. So in order to give you a few of my views, it's important to give a little bit of context about where I'm coming from. So as they've mentioned, I went to university in New York, and after graduating, I went into finance for about a year. Now, very quickly into that journey, it became clear that even though this was something that I could potentially do for a long time, the truth of the matter was that I was not burning. I didn't feel that fire for the work that I was doing. When I tried to think about where I felt the fire, it always came back to education. It always came back to tutoring or mentorship or some kind of development of other people. And so that's why that transition happened. Now, from there, I moved to the African Leadership University, which I believe now a few of the students from this school have even gone to. Now, when I joined ALU, it was an organization of literally 9 people. There was nothing. There was the African Leadership Academy, but the African Leadership University was a place that was completely new. And so everyone who was there had to spend a lot of time learning new skill sets, essentially. And that's why I want to come back to this TIS education, because I was telling someone earlier, my very first project when I got there, I was working at an education institution. I'm coming thinking I'm coming to do learning experience design. Can anyone guess what my first project was when I went there? You can just shout them out. What do you think my first project was? Admin, finance, anyone? Logistics. You see, those would all have been natural evolutions. But my first project when I got there was that I had to do video editing. on 1 terabyte of video data. I didn't even know I had iMovie on my laptop. I didn't even know that this was something I could do. But I had to learn quickly and apply it. And that's where this education comes in, because you are learning specific subjects, but the real thing you are learning, that's not really the point. It is the point, I'm sorry, my teachers. It's also the point. But the real point is that you are learning how to learn quickly and well, and you can retain information in an effective way. Okay, so while we were there, a lot of what I wanted to do was work in the learning team, was work on the learning model for the organization, because essentially we had a blank slate and we were allowed to build from zero. What could an ideal education look like if we wanted to train people who have the right soft skills and who can go into the job market and be ready? So there were 5 principles that came out. I'm going to quiz you on them right after, so be ready. The education had to be active, meaning that people had to be actively doing something. It had to be social, meaning that students had to interact with each other. It's not just that there's a line of reference between the students and the teacher. The students have to interact with each other. It had to be holistic, meaning that a student's emotional development is important as well, not just the intellectual development. It had to be integrated, meaning that there's no disconnect between what someone understands and what they can do. There's no disconnect between what someone understands and what they can do. And finally, it had to be personal, meaning that there's a recognition that people are individuals who are moving at different speeds, and so the learning model has to cater for that in some way, with deadlines, of course. Now, could anyone tell me what the 5 were? Can anyone give it a crack? There might be a prize for you. You want to try? Give it a try. Just yell. Project your voice. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Help her out, help her out. You're sitting there watching her struggling. Help her. Mm-hmm. Yes? Almost. The last one was integrated. Well done, well done. Thank you. Give her a hand. Thank you. Exactly. So with a learning model like that, I feel like one of the most common critiques I heard was that if you have a curriculum that is like this, you are essentially throwing discipline to the wind. What happens to discipline if the learning is personal? Now, the response that a lot of us gave to that, and where I stand on that issue, is that I feel like a lot of the time we conflate control with discipline. We conflate obedience with discipline. The fact that someone is doing what you say does not mean they are actually learning anything. It means they are doing what you say. So what we wanted to do was to be able to create a learning model where people are actually owning their learning. Now, from the African Leadership University, I'm now working as the Director of Learning at Moringa School, which is the coding bootcamp. Are there any people here who are interested in coding or software development? See a few half hands. Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. So while I was there, now, the most important thing that I've learned is to be able to trust youth with education. Because all of our teachers are people who are between 18 and 22. They all graduated from the program themselves, and they are teaching other people with technology assistance. And now you might think that might be risky. As we've mentioned, there are risks. But most of our students are coming from places where they are college dropouts, but we have a 95% job placement rate. People who have never coded before are going through this program and coming out the other end being able to be successful employees. I won't speak more about that. We can talk about it afterwards if you'd like to. The final thing that I learned from there was that it's important to build capacity for your local context. Many of the jobs that we're creating at Moringa School were being outsourced to jobs in Estonia and India for a long time. But now we are trying to build capacity so that people are able to come back and stay and build. Now, as we move into the education forum, just before we start, there's one special surprise that we have. Just before we go to that surprise, I'd like to acknowledge our guest of honor, Mr. Dos Santos. Mr. Dos Santos, could you give us a wave? Now, Mr. Dos Santos is a truly global citizen, and he's a UNESCO representative to Ghana, and he served at UNESCO for 25 years, and was previously the National Director for Teacher Education in the Ministry of Education of Mozambique. He holds several degrees, including but not limited to a Master of Science degree in Project Management with specialization in oil and gas for the University of Liverpool, a doctorate in education from Belize, a postgraduate diploma in professional qualifications in education, measurement, and evaluation from Brazil, and a postgraduate diploma in leading education systems at the national level from Harvard in Boston. Now, just before we go into bringing up our panelists, we have one panelist who was unable to join us in person today, but who has called in because that is how much he cares. Dr. Conrad Hughes is speaking at the Vienna IB conference currently, and he will not be able to join us, but he is the campus and secondary principal at the International School of Geneva, and I believe we have him on Skype about to call in to give us a few words. Mr. Hughes, can you hear us? We're just getting some audio on for you.
Hi.
Hi. Can everyone say hi to Mr. Hughes?
Akwaba.
All right, so Mr. Hughes, we are so sad that you won't be able to join us for the panel discussion, but while we have you here, we'd love to hear from you for just a few minutes on your thoughts on the future of education before we jump into our panel. So the floor is yours.
Well, we're living in an age where everyone is a specialist on education. Did you hear that? I'm not sure that went through.
No, it's the time. Yeah, he needs to move.
Hello? Hello? Looks like there's some sound problems here.
No, we can hear you fine.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think that there are lots of sound bites about education, lots of oversimplifications, lots of dramatization, and we need to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bath water. Some of the stuff that's circulating in education conferences is actually ridiculous. You know, that knowledge is no longer that important because machines can know everything, that we need to concentrate on building skills, but that we don't have to bother with information processing too much. And that everything we've been doing for, you know, the hundreds and hundreds of years that human beings have spent designing education is all irrelevant. So I don't think that these statements are particularly responsible, and none of them are backed up by any serious research because they're all talking about the future. And no one can research the future, at least last time I checked. Now, this much said, there's some serious studies, what we call forecast studies, which are really based on what the education sector, industries, a number of thought leaders, researchers in education, think will be necessary for the future. And you've got many different taxonomies. That's another problem with the 21st century. You've got a taxonomy per conference. You've got a mission statement per institution, per examination board, per school, and there's a lack of coherence in our global approach. Now, everybody will settle for being a good communicator, being a critical thinker, being creative, you know, being a collaborator. but those aren't particularly surprising. I mean, when were you not supposed to be a good communicator? Or are we to assume that in the 21st century you have to be a better collaborator than you were in the Middle Ages? I'm not so sure. I think these are pretty obvious things to say. So I think that it's important to be steady-footed about any wild predictions that we make, and not to get too carried away when we read bestsellers, when we hear TED Talks, when we we come across articles by journalists. People who are experts in education tend to have a more sober approach to the type of education we should be designing. Now, what we're doing at my school, the International School of Geneva, and we're working with UNESCO's International Bureau of Education, is we're trying to develop 7 macro competences that we think really sum up all of this discussion in a very scholarly, serious way, despite all of the caveats and the misgivings that I started with. First, every school should work at developing lifelong learning. You need to be a learning animal to keep learning throughout your life. If you stop learning, you'll be outsourced by another person or a machine. And in a way, this has always been the case. I don't think a truly successful person, successful in the spiritual, educational sense, is someone who stops learning, stops reading, stops thinking. You've got to keep upgrading your intelligence. You've got to keep on top of your own learning throughout your life, not just when when you're at school, when you're at university, but as an adult. Lifelong learner. Secondly, it's important that schools, if they're not already doing it, that they really get students to take ownership of the learning process. We call that self-agency. Learning isn't something that happens to you. Learning is something that you make happen. So any student who complains that she or he can't learn because of the teacher is forgetting that, as Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, once said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. A truly open-minded person can learn from a brick wall and doesn't need a host of experts and teachers and crutches around her or him. So you've got to be able to make learning happen. And of course, you can do that all the more in the 21st century because knowledge is distributed much more heterogeneously and it's much easier to access. But the willpower to go out there and inform yourself is what's critical. So there's that attitude of self-agency. Then you've got the third core global competence. It's knowing how to interact with other people. This has always been necessary. But clearly, in a globalized era, you need to be exceptionally intelligent emotionally, interpersonally, intrapersonally. You need to know how to listen actively, how to respect other people, and to negotiate in a mindful fashion. The problems of the 21st century need to be solved collaboratively. I think we can say that with some comfort and prediction. There's another type of interaction. This is another global competence. It's interacting with diverse tools and resources. So there's a nuance here between using tools in the mold of Homo faber, this idea that you yield a hammer or you use some kind of tool to accomplish something. You're interacting now with intelligent systems in an age of singularity, artificial intelligence, which is growing exponentially. Human beings need to be able to interact with those systems. And you need to be able to use different tools interactively. So this has huge implications for the way that we are teaching technology in schools and how well we're equipping students to jump right in there and use high tech quickly and not to hold them back from doing that. Schools are quite good at creating environments that prepare students for nothing outside of a school, like writing long essays, like writing long commentaries on poems, or not being allowed to access devices when everyone's on a device nowadays. So we've got to get students to use these tools interactively, and also to use things like cloud technology, the whole sort of premise of the sharing economy, intelligently. You know, a lot of adults, they look at some of the video games that students are playing, like Fortnite, and they think it's garbage. But there's quite a lot of higher order thinking going on. Network of students working together on a video game. So I think we need to open our thinking about how we use tools and resources. There's another macro competence, there's 7 altogether, so we're getting, I think it's to number 5. That's interacting in and with the world. In other words, recognizing the planet, the world that we're in, as much more than just the stage for individual or group actualization, but as an ecosystem that is sensitive and is finite. And we need to be sustainable in our behavior, respectful of the consequences of our actions on nature. And especially in a fantastic continent like Africa, where you still have a heritage of natural beauty and fauna, to protect that and to celebrate what will increasingly become probably the planet's richest commodity, you know, alongside obviously natural resources. So respecting natural resources and the planet, and going back to some of the ancient traditional approaches to nature that we've lost along our industrialized path, because we're destroying the planet, and we really need to dial that down. So interacting in and with the world is a vital competence to develop. The last 2, number 6 is transdisciplinarity, thinking across disciplines, building sophisticated, grounded bridges between subjects, so that you are able to look at problems from a transdisciplinary perspective, that you're not just locked in different subjects, and you're not thinking in silos, but you're thinking across subjects. So the host of things that schools can do to really nurture and engender that transdisciplinary thinking. You know, some of the great feats of the 21st century, such as the computer, can't be built by a single individual, and they can't be produced by a single silo of content knowledge. In the real world, knowledge is interactive, and we need to try and get schools to embed that principle into their assessments. Being transdisciplinary in your thinking is competence number 6. And competence number 7, it's being multi-literate. In other words, speaking a number of different languages, being able to master a range of repertoires, knowing how to use them in different settings and according to the audience that you are dealing with. Being financially literate, being scientifically literate, being technologically literate. We really need to push mastery in these different types of literacy. It's not enough just to be literate in numeracy and language literacy. We have to push it much further. And there are all sorts of things that we're not doing in schools that we should be, like teaching more statistics, and ensuring that we are really getting students to become more financially and scientifically savvy. I think the way that we study science is often too specific in methodology. There should be some general philosophy of science grounding, because the general public needs to understand what science is, what principles of science are, like falsificationism, for example. So those are the 7 macro competences that we're developing in our project at the International School of Geneva. And I'm sure that Tema's doing something similar, because I visited your school and it's a very powerful expression of international education. I love that motto you have, knowledge is key, because I think that's grounding what you're doing in something that we must never forget. That is, you can't be a truly creative person, you can't be a truly critical thinker if you don't know anything. So it's not enough to say, oh, well, my iPhone has all the knowledge and I'm just going to walk around being a critical thinker. No, you need to know things and be critical with the things that you know. So knowledge is key, but from that, let's develop these 7 macro competencies: lifelong learning, self-agency, interacting with others, interacting with diverse tools and resources, interacting in and with the world, being transdisciplinary in our thinking, and being multi-literate. These are UNESCO International Bureau of Education's 7 core global competencies.
Thank you so much, Mr. Conrad, for joining us for this panel. We recognize that you've got some things to move on to, but we really appreciate the insights that you're sharing with us about education, and we'll be sure to share the insights that come from the panel with you so that we can keep this discussion moving forward even from today. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like you're having a great party, and happy birthday, Tema.
I just realized I waved at him, but he couldn't see me, so. All right. Now we've come to the meat of the program. This next section of the program will be about an hour long. We're going to spend about 30 minutes having a discussion on stage, and then we'll open it up to the audience for you to also share some questions with our panelists. From here, just before we move on, I'd actually like to just give a quick PSA. This entire event is actually streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube, on Tema International School's Facebook and YouTube pages. So if you have loved ones who aren't here who want to follow the action, please let them know they can follow us on YouTube or on Facebook. So now I'd just like to invite our panelists on stage. I'll call you up one by one, and you can sit in one of these 4 chairs. The chair by itself is mine. Please don't go to that one. So first and foremost, she doesn't need any more introduction. We've heard a lot of great insights from her. Could we welcome back Dr. Fatma Odaimat? Our next panelist is an author, a columnist, a trainer of teachers, and a leadership coach. He's a man of many talents, which he has dedicated to improving education in Ghana and beyond. He's the author of Leadership Reflections on Some Movers, Shakers, and Thinkers, and Mfantipim, the Makers and Great School of a Great School, and Strategies for Effective Teaching and Learning, the former of which was also used to teach leadership seminars at our very own Ashesi University. He's taught with the Los Angeles Unified School District in the USA for 10 years and coordinated the Gifted and Talented Education, otherwise known as GATE program. Through this GATE Institute in Ghana, he has designed many workshops in teacher education across Ghana, and he's a senior lecturer teaching creative and critical thinking at Accra College of Medicine. Along with many advisory positions, he's also a frequent guest on many TV and radio shows, and was recently a distinguished guest speaker at the African Leadership University, Mauritius. Finally, he was recognized by New African Magazine, London, as among the most 100 influential Africans of 2016. Please let's welcome Mr. Anis Hafa. Our next panelist is an educator whose vision is both international and Pan-African. He has been a teacher of long standing, first at the prestigious Achimota School, then for the past 25 years at SOS Herman Miner International College, where he first served as vice principal and is now the principal. In addition to being the chair of the board of Ghana Industrial Skills Development Center, he has served as the lead education consultant for the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, their educational products in Ghana, and as an educational expert on the SOS Kinderdorf International Organization's educational expert team. To complement this work, he also serves on several boards, including the International Senate of SOS Children's Villages, Institute of Teacher Education and Development, Cambridge Schools Community, and International Community School in Kumasi, among others. Please let's welcome Mr. Israel Titiofe. Now, our final panelist is a seasoned educator with over 25 years hands-on experience in international school education. She holds a Commonwealth Executive Master's in Business Administration and a bachelor's degree in Biological Sciences, both from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and a postgraduate diploma in education from the University of Cape Coast, and a final qualifying diploma in administration from the Chartered Institute of Administration in Ghana. She's currently the vice principal of Ghana International School and is in charge of lower secondary section, where she combines her school leadership skills with her passion for mentoring teachers and students alike. In her spare time, she loves to read and watch movies. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Please let's welcome Miss Ida Abikwe. Could we please give our panelists one more hand? Now, as a self-proclaimed education nerd, this is really a dream come true for me to be sitting here with all of you. In terms of this discussion, what we'd really like to see happen is for us to be able to have an organic conversation. I'd like to hear where we agree and where we disagree with each other, and what sorts of thoughts we have about the future of education. So to open up the discussion, I'd like to ask, just because this is a topic that has come up a couple times today already, we've heard this term flexible learning, and it has many definitions. Could each of you please share with us what you understand by flexible learning and what you see as the future of flexible learning in education and how that interacts with discipline in school? The question was, could you share with us your understanding of what flexible learning is and what you see as the future of flexible learning and how that interacts with discipline in schools? And we can go around.
You want me to go?
Sure.
Well, thank you very much for the occasion to share some of my views with you. I would like to just explain to you how flexible learning applies to me personally, teaching at a medical school at the Accra College of Medicine. You know, these days, with technology, there's not a single disease or the cure or diagnosis that's not available on the YouTube. So in a semester, for example, what I do is called a guided practice. You lead by showing young people exactly how to explore the various diseases and so on, and then find a cure. Now, what happens is this. You empower young people to take on the responsibility of following their own curiosities. And one example would be this. What I do, for example, if I have 20 students, you get them to identify about 20 different diseases that they are interested in, and then go on YouTube. It's as simple as that. And to find the various cures there, so that they can now come and present their findings to the rest of the class. So what we do is that, they watch it a couple of times, they see exactly what the procedures are, whether it's an invasive procedure, whether it's a non-invasive procedure, and how other countries are dealing with this particular ailment. And then they speak to it. Now I'll tell you, by the end of semester, we've really identified about 20 different specialties, and we know the diagnosis, the cures, and that sort of thing. But all of that is done in a natural environment where young people take it upon themselves to be flexible in what they do. And then I think, like you said earlier, the teaching itself is minimized because the real teaching is done by students as teamwork. So that in a matter of semester, we've learned more than one teacher by themselves could have taught. So that's an example of flexible learning from the point of view of what I do with medical students.
So what I'm understanding is a focus on pushing the learning back to the students so they are teaching each other, and that's what allows it to be flexible. How does that interact with our other panelists' understanding?
Okay. For me, flexible learning has different aspects. It can be students, like choosing leading their learning and having the choice at a certain in their inquiry cycle and as they're leading their learning to have a choice to experiment and research and understand something they are interested about. It also comes with the teaching and learning strategies that the teachers are adapting in every class. So flexibility in these teaching and learning. I don't teach in one way. I don't assess in one way. So this allows me for a lot of flexibility in the process and how I'm leading my class. And I allow within also the classroom time where the kids are, run their own projects and their own inquiries into the things they are interested. So there are different aspects where I feel flexible learning can really benefit our schools.
Thank you.
Well, I would say that with flexible learning, you can look at it in two ways.
There's a bit of distortion.
Go on.
Okay. In some areas, it's described as the blended learning, where you have children basically learning by using learning platforms on their own at home. A typical example of such a good learning platform is Khan Academy. You have children listening to videos, basically following through a lesson, working through mathematics at home. And then when they come to school, based on what they couldn't do, they work with a teacher who acts as a facilitator to get them to understand it more. So in my understanding, flexible learning is basically giving a choice to students to learn when, what, where, how, and then come back to school, feedback with the teacher, and then get them to remedy the gaps that they had in their learning when they were learning alone. Basically, that's my understanding of it.
Now, if that kind of flexibility is given to students, does that not mean that we start to compromise the quality of the education, Mr. Titiofe?
A strong belief I have is that schools, secondary schools, ages 11 to 18, are for learning. And we must create the opportunities for learning. I think a key thing for learning is open-mindedness for both teachers and students. Without an open mind, learning can never take place. And we must create that environment for open-mindedness, where children are free to think within the disciplines, and there has to be a discipline. We can never throw away mastery of reading, or mastery of physics, or mastery of mathematics. But within the physics, I'll give you an example. A child who learns about light and knows that a blind man cannot see begins to transmit the physical thinking into technology and says, how do I integrate the two and find a solution for the blind man? So he designs a walking stick with a camera that sees and transmits information to the blind man. The physics is there, the open-mindedness is there, the mastery of language to explain what he has done to other people is also there. That kind of flexibility must exist in our secondary schools, otherwise there will be no learning.
Now, that thought on flexible learning, as someone who grew up in the humanities, sounds like a great idea. But Dr. Fatima, does that translate well into the sciences? And how does flexible learning relate to the sciences specifically in the next 15 years, in your view?
On the contrary, I tend to go and spend a lot of time in the classrooms, and I'm not only kind of an observer, but actually I experience it with my own kids who are actually in this flexible learning environment. What I've really noticed is that they go beyond what we ever expected, beyond. We actually think that, once we sit and write these curriculum, we think that this is what we want them to know. And we really underestimate the potential of the human mind and the human interest in knowing and in learning. When we were born, nobody taught us how to walk and talk. We actually just learned it by observing. So we all have that natural, ability to learn and that love for learning. What happened to us in the old times is we went to school and that kind of interest and inquiry was killed because we were told that was the only thing we needed to know. Now, what we do, we mainly put, what is the minimum we want you to know? What I believe now, our role is to very much define the minimum. But what I observe on day to day, what I see with my own kids, is that their potential and how their minds work is way beyond what we ever think is possible.
So there's an underestimation of what human beings are actually capable of.
Honestly, believe we are.
Now, when you raise a point like that, I would think that then the teachers have a really central role to play in that, and yet we speak about student-centered learning. I guess, Mr. Hafa, what role do you see the teachers playing in nurturing that spirit, and how can the teachers in Ghana and beyond do a better job of fostering that kind of student-centered learning in students in the next 15 years?
You know, that's a very good question. In my column in the Graphic today, I wrote about the irony of analog teachers in the digital age. Are you with me on that one? Now, the issue is this. We live in an age where young people are savvy in terms of technology, especially the use of smartphones, for example. But then, I remember I was recommending that our secondary schools, for example, are allowed to use smartphone to investigate information, knowledge, and the rest. There was an uproar. So what I'm saying is this. We need to pay particular attention to the culture, because the culture tends to be an impediment. And another example I'll give you is this. I remember, when you introduced me, you talked about the GATE Institute, the Gifted and Talented Education, which I coordinated in the US. Now, the essence of that was to help young people to think their own thoughts. You know, and many times you ask yourself in Ghana, especially when I was educated here, how often was I asked to express an opinion? Our opinion didn't matter. But what a gifted program does is that it doesn't want you to be ordinary. This was a program that was developed in the 1980s by the state of California. But the issue is this. How do we develop uncommon sense with our young people? In other words, common sense is mainstreamed, but we want to help our young people develop uncommon sense. Now, this is the issue. How will the culture understand that or accept it? And I'll give you a quick example. Let's use the case of fire. Common sense tells you that fire will burn you. That's common sense. But uncommon sense will tell you this. You are a firefighter. You need to walk through the fire. How are you going to develop a suit for a fireman so that they can cross the fire and save children? These are the elements that have to be incorporated into our system now, because what we have now is that everybody is thinking the same way. We are all being mainstreamed, and innovation is curtailed in the process. But the culture has to be able to accept that. That is one of the most difficult things that I have in terms of training teachers in this country. From Accra all the way to Wa, the Mamprus area and so on. We tend to be stuck in a way where we are teaching young people the same way we were taught in the colonial days. So that's the challenge right there for you.
And that's an incredibly difficult challenge to overcome. I guess, Ms. Abikwe, what are your thoughts on how we interact with teachers and how to bring them into the modern age in a way that is more productive for our students?
Basically, I would say that ICT or technology will go a long way to help teachers do that. Fortunately, we have experts in everything we do. So teachers can link up with communities, online communities, virtual communities. They can also link up with their peers to collaborate and find ways around this problem. Basically, like my other colleagues have said, being open-minded about learning is very important, and wanting to share is also extremely important, because no one person is an epitome of all knowledge, and therefore using IT tools, basically being able to contact other learning communities outside our jurisdiction, elsewhere, expert teachers, expert in fields. Teachers can then get that knowledge to be able to practice it in their classroom. So basically, to sum it up, collaboration and the use of digital tools will help teachers do that.
And while we're speaking about digital tools, though, because digital tools, and we mentioned it earlier, that's one of the areas where I've heard the most amount of fear related to digital tools in education and how we use them. How can we use digital tools effectively such that we are not then contributing to our own problems related to unemployment, for example, in the teaching profession? Mr. Ofei.
Well, I've heard many people talk about digital tools without providing the means and the education about the ethics involved in their use. Sometimes I'm very disturbed that in a poor country like Ghana, there's a certain culture they call Sakawa, where young people actually misuse digital tools, like their telephones, to break into people's accounts and so on. But it comes back to the same open-mindedness that teachers must also have. We do not just introduce learning about digital technology in our classrooms, but we must discuss in depth what the implications are, the ethics of using it, the usefulness of having it, and what it can be done with. I see that in our syllabuses, especially in the public schools, there is nothing like that. In my school, technology is core. Everyone does something about technology. But people also learn about the implications. For example, we're learning about the implications and the damage to ourselves. Is this something we can depend on for everything we do? No. As Conrad Hughes said, young people need a firm grounding about what they are learning and what they are heading, where they are heading. To do that, yes, flexible learning, but teachers will forever provide the guidance for doing it and doing it well. This is my view.
Do you have a different viewpoint?
Well, in my experience, students are even providing guidance to teachers on how to use digital tools around the classroom. We've had to set up a lab where all our kids, it's an innovation lab where our students are tasked to break our systems because they can. They can break our systems. Every firewall, every protection, everything we do. This new generation is capable of learning beyond. It's their, computers and internet and technology. It's their life. For us, we're still asking ourselves, should I give my child 1 hour of iPad? No, 2 hours, that's the maximum. We're still debating these. But if you ask the future generation, these are things they're not going to even be debating. It's part of their life. It's them. It's who they are right now. It's part of who they are. And honestly, in this element specifically, we are learning a lot from them. It is, I think, at this point, we've reached to the point where we need to realize that teachers are learners just the same way as students. If I'm going to say all my teachers are expert in IT, I'm going to be lying. On the contrary, I think our teachers undergo more than 25 days of professional learning. Because education has been transforming so dramatically, the amount of learning and unlearning and learning and unlearning our teachers have to go through is just as much as the kids. So I think we're in this kind of phase where learning now is not at all limited to only students. But staff are in this in it together, and we are learning together in these times. For our kids, maybe it won't be that much, but right now, there's a huge amount of learning that we're doing, and we're learning by doing it. We cannot say we're not going to do it until we have it all very well structured, we have the policy, we have the guidelines. You can have that, but day in, day out, we're going back, and with the help of the students, changing things. They are part of that whole implementation and that change. They're part and parcels. We're not divided anymore. I don't think now, at this point, there's no more teachers and students. There's learners. We're all learners together, and we're moving forward.
Absolutely. And as someone who is a non-technical person working in a coding bootcamp, I can definitely corroborate the idea that these young people are doing supernatural things with technology these days that we could all learn from. Now, just before we move on from education, and before we start to open it up to the audience, I think we've spoken a lot about what technology can do to improve education. I'd like to hear from you, what do you think human beings are uniquely placed to do in education in the future? Are there any aspects of the teaching profession that cannot be automated or that cannot be affected by technology?
You know, I'd like to add a word to what the gentleman from Geneva said, that we need to empower learners. Now, empower learners can take many dimensions. The concerns that we have in terms of the abuse of digital technology and so on, but we have to find a way where we can guide young people to use it well, to address the concerns that we have. But I'm telling you, it's impossible to make any progress in a developing country now without the use of technological advancement. Considering that we can leapfrog stale technology, the old bureaucracy, even in terms of, even if you look at governments, for example, the forms that we can get from governments, where before then you have to go to offices and they ask you to come tomorrow and so on. But what I'm saying is this: digital technology is here to stay, and we have to learn how to incorporate that and mainstream it. But again, the concern is this: we are looking at 300,000 public school teachers in this country. How many of them are savvy to use it? I don't know the numbers, but I will be honest with you, maybe about 1%. So what do we do? And what I've seen in the villages, for example, where we are trying to stop young people access because of the fears that we have, is where, for example, there are computer labs, and they've covered the computer labs with the computers with brunua with blankets and bed sheets. The rationale for the heads and the assistant heads is that if you allow the children to use the stuff, they will break the stuff. Virtually, you have to beg the teachers and the principals that they can't break the stuff, and the only way they will break the computers is if they pick them up and drop them on the floor. So that's a challenge right there. But how on earth, in the 21st century, do we make any advancements here, knowing how sharp our kids are? I'm saying this because I've had the opportunity to teach all kinds of nationalities here in this country and outside, and the cognitive abilities of our young people are just as bright as any others. So what I'm saying is this, especially the concern that I expressed in terms of how we can use technology, digital technology, even for medical school. You know, what we need to do is let young people know the possibilities, that these are the things that you can do, and then empower them to chart their own course. Because at the end of the day, what I keep saying is this: there are 3 key educational outcomes. One of them is, look, with all the education that you're getting, what is the product that you can produce? It can be a software product. For all the education that you're getting, what is the service that you can provide? You know, these are the concerns that we have to concern ourselves with all the time, taking into account the new technology, that's software packages for Uber or Airbnb, whatever you call it, and so on. And the third one, and this is key: how do we use digital technology to solve some of our own problems? You know, and I keep saying this: every person has to be empowered to at least think about how they can unravel their own curiosities for a purpose. And that is when you begin to see that we are adding value to the human being, to the community, and to society. These are the challenges that are facing us in the 21st century from the point of view of my experience in this country.
So we're about to open things up to the audience. Thank you so much, panelists. But just before we do that, I'd love to hear, I just have one more question, and we can keep it as short as we can. But I'd love to hear, because a lot of what we've spoken about is easy to do from the perspective of a lot of our private institutions. What is the relationship between private and public institutions in the future of education, and how we actually see the benefits of a lot of these changes we are talking about?
Basically, there can be collaboration, as I said. There's a lot of information, a lot of ways of new teaching, a lot of ways of doing things that the public school does not have or know. Because a lot of the times, the teachers are not they are trained, but training, I know that due to challenges, financial challenges, a lot of public school teachers may not be undergoing professional development on a regular basis. So partnerships with schools who can afford it, working with the students. We, for example, in GIS, invite our neighboring schools, community schools, into our school once every week. And our teachers teach them physics and math on a weekly basis. We bring in the teachers' time conference once every year, and we also have workshops to help educate the teachers. So I would say that basically a collaboration which is structured so that it's not just ad hoc or arbitrary, but which is timely and which is done periodically to help both the local teachers and the private schools benefit. A kind of symbiotic relationship is what I'll call it.
So the partnerships between institutions are important. Thank you so much to our panel. Can we please give a hand to our panelists? Just before we open things up to the audience, unfortunately, one of our panelists, Dr. Fatima, is on her way to the IB conference to speak, so she needs to leave us. But thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Fatima.
Thank you. Thank you. It's definitely been a great honor. And on that point of collaboration between private and public, I think we should also focus on collaboration between private schools more often.
Ariane, we'll talk to you. All right, at this point, we have about 20 minutes open to the audience. We've had a lot of discussion up here. Are there any questions that people from the audience have for our panelists about any of the topics that we've discussed or anything outside in education? I believe we have someone going around with a microphone. Oh, there are two microphones in the two aisles, so if you have a question, please feel free to just go up to one of them and you can share your question to our panelists.
I'm short. Hi, can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, panelists. My name is Flossie Azu from SOS, and I really love everything that you guys have shared. I've been in education all my life, as young as I am, and this speaks to the very core of my passion and the reason why I wake up every morning. I like what you're saying about collaborating in the public space and the private space.
You can't hear her.
You can't hear.
No.
Can you hear me?
Maybe come forward a bit.
I should come closer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I said I like everything that you're saying about collaboration, but I wonder what role you think amazing institutions like the ones that you founded, the ones that you're working in, has in the policy space. So there's a huge chasm between what people in great institutions like the ones that you're in, pioneering, being in the IB education program and whatnot, are doing. There's a huge chasm between that and then what people in public education spaces, what people are being exposed to. Some of them, their parents don't even allow them to go to school yet because there's a huge opportunity cost that families can't afford. In what ways can you think that great institutions like you, making big strides forward, can kind of like close the gap between people who are coming to your school and people who are going to public schools, and especially using policy to do that? Is my question clear?
Yeah. I would say that as part of our strategic goals, one of our strategic goals is to actually work with the community, to give back to the community, because we understand that we are privileged. We make our children understand that they are privileged, and therefore there's a need to give back to the community. And so, like I said, it's policy, because we have it in our strategic plan. And then we have actually structured times where students go to the community, and like she's saying, it's not a CAS program as such, but we go on a leadership day, where we go to these schools in our community, look around, see what problems the students can fix in their own way. This year, for example, we went around and we saw that they needed shade. Okay, so this is what we did. We bought seedlings or seeds, we bought polythene bags, we bought black soil, and we asked our children to plant those seeds and water them every day, for example, so that we can then take them over and plant them in those schools where we thought that they needed some shade. And that's exactly what we did. So yes, as part of policy, we can, as private schools, incorporate it in our policy to be able to do that. We have done that.
Any other responses?
Sorry. As the Chinese say, just don't aim at giving people rice, but teach them how to grow it.
Yeah.
And I think that we've been discussing and talking about education, and parts of that education is for our kids to learn how to teach other people how to do things. What are the problems in our society? What problems do young people face? Can our children who have the privilege of being in our schools actually go out there and teach young people how to do things in better ways? For example, if you're an agric student and you've studied agric, why do you not go to a village and show them how to do it properly? If you have access to funding through parents or the community in which you live, why don't you collect some funding for the women who struggle every day in the village to plant? I think there are several ways in which privileged schools can go out there and help underprivileged people. My school is situated in a good community, I would say, socioeconomic community. But people die every day at the junction of the school. People crash into each other because there are no signs. We also realize that there are cars crossing with drivers who have only just completed junior secondary school. They cannot even understand the signs. Here is a problem in our community. What do? We should send, first of all, let the so-called privileged children learn about the problem and try to educate people in the community as to how to avoid that danger. Somebody mentioned that we should teach actively. And I think we should teach actively in terms of our social context. And when I say social context, it involves the communities we live in, the society we live in, the things we learn, the history, the context of the history we learn. We still talk about slavery, which is disappointing. We should have solved this problem, understood it, and solved the problem so that it does not occur even in Africa already. It tells you how poor our educational system is structured. Unfortunately, what the young lady said about what education was yesterday and what it is today is so true. Unless educationists like us begin to change the way we look at things in our society. That's my addition to this.
That was a big question. And I think it needs to be addressed properly in terms of how, I mean, it would be good to have students in a privileged setting like do the IB programs and so on to give of themselves to other private entities, but it will be minimal. What I'm suggesting is this: we want to look at best practices. And for example, if you look at the IB program, one of the most interesting aspects of it, which I suggest that is mainstream in the education system in Ghana, is what you guys call CAS, the Creativity Activity Service. Now what that does for the first time, it shows leadership. That education is not just about you. It's about how you can develop skill, number one, and be in a position where you can transfer the skill to a community and make people's lives easier. These are the things that we really need to look at. And it's a form of assessment. Assessment being that typically what we're looking at is this. True, false, multiple choice, writing essays, these true, poor, pass, forget business that we're talking about. But even in the Ghana Education Service syllabus, we have something called projects. But we are not doing the projects because I don't think teachers have been trained to do these particular projects. But the CAS activity is a project. I think this is the thing, these are some of the things that we have to really incorporate into the curriculum. But then having said that, the teachers themselves need to be taught at the training colleges how to make these things happen. You know, because what we have, everything is theory in a book. We can read it, we can understand it, but we don't have a deeper understanding because we don't know how to apply that. But the point I'm suggesting is this. If you look at the public schools in this country, every school needs to be an oasis of excellence. By that, what I mean is that we need to add value to the school itself. And this is something from Lee Kuan Yew in 1964 when he came to visit Ghana, that we cannot continue living the way we are, where young people are sitting in dust, they are being taught in dust, they are eating in dust, food is being cooked in the dust. Well, why is the education then? You know, so what I'm saying is this. We have to learn to empower our young people to learn how to do things for themselves. And I'm talking from the experience of even growing up in a village in Obuasi called Tutuka. We didn't have anything. We had just one room. But our school was special to us. We didn't have, what we did wasn't really classified as creativity activity service. But every weekend, we go into the bushes, we cut bamboo to round up our school so that the goats will not come and eat our flowers. The flowers were grown by us. So what I'm saying is this. We need to now understand the leadership, and I'm talking to the leadership now. In this culture, in African culture, leadership means a person being served. We've turned psychology upside down. The leaders themselves need to be on the ground, visibly serving, and then we can take it from there. But the worst thing we can do is let young people give the wrong impression. They are getting educated so they can be served. That's the worst thing that we can do. So back to your question again, we want to begin to look at how we can use our skills to help ourselves first at every school site, and we have about 16,000 of them. This is where I think education should go, and then we begin for the first time to understand the purpose of education. Why are we being educated? If the environment in which we find ourselves are not conducive to our human well-being. These are larger challenges that have to be met.
Hello. Okay. Good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
Dr. Anis, I really appreciate the project by which, or the medium by which you are trying to educate people on education. Okay, my name is Kwesi Aford. I run a project called Read to Play, and it is also under Kiddie Esports. What we are trying to do is that we try to go to underprivileged communities. Now, we use video games to teach kids how to read. Now, kids love to play. And my first question will have to be, how does play come into the education? Because one thing that I found out was that Tema used to have playgrounds at every community. So when you go to Community 7, there's a playground there. When you go to Community 4, playground there. Community 2, 3. But unfortunately, all these playgrounds has been turned into drinking spots. So there's no alternative creative avenues for kids to learn, to play, and to exercise their educative, creative abilities. In Ghana now, we're building multifaceted communities with a little concern to play, and especially to children. Now, what we try to do is that we use video game. I'm happy the speaker who came on by Skype spoke about Fortnite, which is a medium by which a lot of online interaction between kids and also a community of video gamers. Now, we try to use video games to help kids to learn. This is the trick. The kids love to play video games. So how do you put education in there? Now, what we do is that we give them opportunity to play video game only if they have read a chapter of a book. So we go to communities, we set up our consoles, we put all the kids' games out there. If you want to play a game for a limited time, you read a chapter of a book. After you read the chapter of a book, we give you a time to play the game. After you finish playing the game, you will want to play again. You will read another book, or you read another chapter, and it goes on and on. This is what we tried at the International Book Fair, and it worked for us. The parents were surprised, and it could be modeled even in our homes. If your child wants to play a video game, let him read a chapter of a book, finish his homework, do something educative before he plays the game.
Sorry, so sorry. Just in the interest of time, would you mind, what is the question that you have for the panel?
Okay, I want to find out if, could they expand on how education, also fall into the parts of education of our kids?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I can answer that question. Did you say your name is Castle Hayford?
My name is Kwesi Hayford.
Oh, Kwesi Hayford. Good. You know, I remember a trip that I took to Mauritius, African Leadership University. A good part of their social skills were learned through games. And these were not skills that were practiced in the classroom. They practiced these skills at the beach. At the beach. And this is where you learn what leadership means. This is where you learn what team spirit means. This is where you learn how to lose and accept the loss gracefully. This is where you learn to win and be courteous to the leaders. So games are very, very important as a tool for education. Now coming back to the technology again, now that's something that you have to begin to understand. That it's not everybody. Again, I think the gentleman from Geneva said it. The skills that you learn from video games are very important. But we need to really define the purpose of the game. We need to define the duration of the game. And then we also want to look at some of the skills that can be learned in between. Because digital games, I mean, these electronic games are also digital. But the most important thing that they have to be structured. If you allow a kid, they'll play a video game all day long. So what I'm saying is this, it has to be in limited proportions, because games, and the disadvantage of that is that many of the games are about people shooting and killing each other. And sometimes that's a bit too much. But there are excellent ones in terms of software packages that are really designed even for STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. All these things are there. But then we need to be able to identify exactly the software packages, exactly where we can get them, and train people how to use them. But they have to be structured within the curriculum in a particular discipline, within a particular scope, and within a time element, so that our kids don't go way off.
I would also like to add that instead of just using it, you know, play a game and watch, read a book and then play a game, if he could get, like Anis is saying, games that bring about critical thinking, games that bring about collaboration, because normally you play with somebody, games that bring about creativity, fashion, or let them play games that brings about the skill you want them to learn. So they play that game and then they transfer that skill to whatever it is that they have to learn. But just saying, using it as a stick and carrot, you know, you play a game, you get, it's good, but I think it could be better if they could find softwares or games which teach exactly the skills that you want them to learn. Then that way you are only transferring knowledge.
I'm sure we're going to see some proposals from students for FIFA in the next year's curriculum. We won't accept it. We are almost out of time.
Contribute to this game theory.
Sure.
Games are very important. It's actually a multi-billion-dollar industry, but there has to be a purpose to games. What I see in our environment is a very unplanned and haphazard approach to the use of digital technologies, which is not like you see in South Africa or Kenya. Where you work now, there is a purpose to that, the coding that you learn, and you say what? From learning coding, they go to different employments. Kenya has a multi-million-dollar industry in digital technologies, payments, and so forth. And we can develop that too, but it has to be purposeful, planned, so that children are not all over the place playing with, look at our environment. I saw the road when I came in here. A student of mine comes to say, Mr. Fair, I'm spraying farms in Akosombo with what? With a drone. Drone technology. That's what we want, a purposeful approach to this. Not the kind of haphazard, unplanned, and we have to be careful when the foreigners come and sell us their culture and their context. We have our own problems developed here that gives us the problems, and we need to teach our children how to respond to those problems with the technologies or with the games, as you say. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Chrissy, can we look at a video?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we will. Just before we go to the video, so I see we are almost out of time. I see there's a few people who have some burning questions. So we'll take a question, two questions, a question from each of you, and we'll try to have one of our panelists respond to each. So Apioko, I saw you go up.
Okay.
Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Apioko Ashong-Abe, a proud alumna of Tema International School. And also, I work with the media, and one of the things that I do at City FM, City TV is handle special education projects. Anis, I've worked with you on several of those projects. Now, one of the things that I discover in my work, it takes me all over Ghana, is that in our 116 educational districts across the country, first thing, reading has been taken off the timetable. Secondly, now we are talking about teacher licensure exams. On the one hand, the government is saying we need to do better in preparing our teachers to enter the classroom so that we can move forward as a nation. And the teachers are saying, if I'm a mathematics teacher, I don't need to know English. If I'm a science teacher, what do you expect me to be reading books for? So we have a problem. Then your capitation grant gives 9 cedis per student for a year for feeding. That's less than 1 cedi a month. Now we have these beautiful conversations, and I must say, very forward-thinking. But my issue is this. Most of the time, these conversations do not get to the policymakers. So I want to know, as privileged schools, as international schools, as people who understand what education should be in the 21st century and beyond, I want to know how we are breaking waves, how we are advocating to have a seat at the table. Because I tell you, TIS, my graduating class, there are only 39 of us. My husband went to pre-tech, 742 in his graduating class. So we're in the minority. It means that teachers teaching in this space, educationists in this space are also in the minority. So if we don't have a say at the table, at the policy-making table, how do we effect the change that we need to compete globally as a nation? Thank you.
You want to address it?
Thank you, madam. Very well said. We cannot bring transformation in the next 15 years alone. Yes, I went to fast film school a few weeks ago to visit the school. Yes. And the school that was built for 600 kids is now housing 306 kids. I don't know if you've been there recently. The science laboratory, I'm sorry, is where the boys are now doing their things, you know? How can you teach children when they actually defecate around the science labs? How can you actually bring change when people have that kind of mindset? They must have boarding house tutors. You know, in Ghana, we don't like to say the negative things. And that's where the problem is. We don't like to say this is bad or this must change. Because if you do that, you are rocking the boat. You are very right, we don't have a say at the table because we are elitist. You bring an idea that works, it's an elitist idea. And where does that word come from? Please tell me, you are a historian of the best schools in Ghana. Where does that word come from? Achimota School was built to be elitist, to show the way, elitist of the mind. In Fanspoon School, the same. Wesley Girls, they say, where is it? Where did we go? We've actually gone backwards. So we need a change. Whether we're talking technology, 21st century skills, whatever, it must bring change to the people. How are you and I going to do that? I think it's the best big question. But we cannot explore this here. It would be forever. The point is that we are teaching our children what the negative culture is. We're taking our children to the difficult areas of this country. We're taking our children to show them why water doesn't flow in some villages. Perhaps that alone can spark the spirit of discovery and problem solving, so they can take these to their villages to solve the problems of the future, of the next 15 years. But as of now, I'm sorry we didn't solve anything.
Thank you so much.
Can I respond to it?
Just in the interest of time, we wanted to have one person answer each of them. So perhaps can we have a final question?
Good afternoon. My name is Sedu Sazan and I'm in IB2. So my question is fairly simple. So earlier this year, big companies such as Google, Apple, and Amazon announced that university degrees or tertiary education degrees would not be a requirement. And as Mr. Titi Ofei stated, he said that in this 21st century, it is easier or it is really feasible that we can master any skills given the information that we have. So as a young adult and someone who is soon going to progress, I want to know what are some of the perks of going to university, especially when you consider things such as the school fees for skills that I can learn on the internet or other alternate options. Thank you.
I didn't get a question.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, so the question was, with all that we can learn on our own, and with all the skills that we can acquire outside of the formal sector, what value is there in going to university still and going through a lot of these skills, especially considering the kind of school fees and things that are associated with many of the top universities? I hope I got your question right.
I would say that, yes, we can learn on our own. But the point is that the teacher in the classroom acts as a facilitator or a coach to help us better explore the skills that we need to have. Basically, learning on your own is fine, but you'd realize that even though people homeschool, at a point in time, they still have to go and sit examinations, they still have to more or less have somebody assess them to make sure that indeed and in fact they know, they have grasped what it is that they need to grasp. So basically, I would say that yes, flexible learning is there. You can learn, you can contribute to the learning by collaborating with people, but basically, you cannot take the teacher out. The teacher is here to stay, acting as a facilitator and not as a repository of all knowledge. Thank you.
Short.
I wanted to address the question of licensing teachers. You know, when you are licensed, like any profession, whether you're an engineer, a medical doctor, or an architect, what licensing does is that it puts you in a certain professional category so that you can speak with pride in terms of your own profession. So I really recommend that. And then the other thing is this. When you're licensed, then there's a code of conduct. This is how you are supposed to conduct yourself in public and in private, and also in a school situation. We have to do that. But Apioko, back to your question again. You know, it's very important that through the licensing process, we make sure that teachers can speak well, they can write well, and they can do basic mathematics. After that, I think the sky is the limit in terms of particular subject areas. But I'll tell you this. From the credentials that I got studying in the School of Education in the US, it doesn't matter whether you have a PhD or 3 of them. You have to be processed through the profession in terms of the psychology of teaching, in terms of some basic skills that will complement the particular subject that you have. Because you'll be surprised, people carry massive degrees, but they can't teach it, you see? So what I'm saying is this. Licensing is something that has to be supported in this country because other progressive countries are doing it. And I brought a video what I think we can show in terms of how we pay particular attention to the preparation of teachers. And I'll tell you this. In Finland, and I hope we can show this video, it's more difficult to get into the School of Education than it is to get into medical school or engineering, because our superior systems in terms of our affective intelligence is all learned in the lower grades. How do you learn to share? How do you learn not to cheat? How do you learn to respect? How do you learn to say thank you? How do you learn to speak? How do you learn to say please? These are the social skills that have to be learned. And as far as some of the developed countries are concerned, this is the crux of the matter. And you'll be surprised a teacher who's paid more than a medical doctor. Whether this culture will be able to cross over into that future is a question that we have to deal with. But I brought a video, and I hope you can show it. It shows how Finland pays particular attention to their teachers so that we can begin to develop particular products, knowing that they don't have the kind of resources that we have.
Absolutely, we will be playing it at the end.
Preparation of teachers. I mean, you heard Dr. Fatima, they had said there is a shortage of teachers, and that's a worldwide problem. What do you do first? Preparation of teachers or licensing them? Which comes first? If you look at the kind of schools we have where teachers actually can use stones to teach ICT, what do you do first? Preparation or licensing?
You do both.
Do both.
I mean, we really don't need to restrict ourselves to one or the other. We have to do
but
both.
one problem
with the purpose
is
that
more
we
prominent. One problem, I would say, there are people who inherently are professional. Whether they are doctors killed in this town, and they go for free. Doctors swap limbs, and they go for free. There's no medical legal system that works well in our country. Please, the country is broken, and we need to systematically look at our problems. We have solved the problems as if, you know how the chicken works? That's how we solved our problems. We need a systematic way of approaching every problem and solving it well. Otherwise, I'm sorry, 15 years from now, we'll be here.
Chicken walking.
Can I just say something?
Do you mind if we just take
I
the
would
question?
say
Okay.
that quickly, this is a quick one. I would say that, yes, we need to train teachers first. For some of us, we started as pupil teachers. What they call pupil teachers are teachers who haven't been to training school. And I tell you, it makes a difference to go for training. Because basically, before you are trained, you can teach content. But when you're trained, you understand what the whole lesson is about. You understand what teaching and learning is all about. You understand that you have to build on previous knowledge. You understand that you have to assess the learning and have a plenary. You understand so many aspects of teaching that you wouldn't otherwise have understood if you're just coming from the classroom to teach. So I would say that teacher training first and then licensing later. Thank you.
Nice one. So I understand we have time for 2 more questions. We'll take a question here.
Hello. Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, my name is Krantama. I'm a communications consultant and a pioneer TIS parent. It's been a fascinating conversation, and just listening to the discussion, there are a couple points I picked up. I wanted to make a comment about the connection between our culture, between knowledge acquisition, and local content and ethics. Just listening to the whole discussion, I have a friend who's trying to bring education to a local, in a local community school in a conservative area, and parents refused to let their girl child do ICT because they said it was an avenue for Sakawa. So this is, I mean, I found this to be very surprising, and it's a cultural impediment. And then the idea that teachers are also learners, culturally we find that very difficult. And it's too freewheeling for us. The teacher is supposed to come and let us master a body of knowledge. So that's another cultural impediment. And looking at our local challenges, the question I have is, how can we develop local content which includes ethics in the use of digital tools as part of the curriculum, and also develop a local content in our digital delivery for maths, for English, for languages, so that across the country, as you're saying, a systematic approach, people are taught that all of us in Ghana have to be maths whizzes, English whizzes, local language whizzes, and innovators. And then the idea of the CAS or projects across the country and creativity. I think the example that Anis gave about bamboo fences protecting the flowers that they had, I think we disempower our local schools, and we should find ways, maybe at the policy level, of incorporating empowerment. So, the question again, how do we incorporate local content which has an ethical component in our curriculum? Thank you.
Is it? Oh yes, can we just get the last question so we answer them both? So the first question is around localizing content into cultural context, including ethics.
Thank you very much. My name is Cynthia Opuni. I'm a real estate developer in the local area. And I've enjoyed this discourse very much. I'm a TIS parent. I'm very glad I came along to hear this because I was very interested in what education is going to look like in 15 years. I think Kwesi, our moderator, tried to ask the panelists this question earlier. I don't think anybody actually tried to answer it. He asked if the use of technology or the digitalization of tools that we're using, whether it's permeated every aspect of the curriculum, as it were. So I would like to know whether you find in your experience or as educators that there are some children who are a little bit resistant to the use of technology in any form, as it were, or are they all going on the train and, we're all heading ahead, as it were? My second question is, in moving along and the joy with which our children are also enjoying the use of technology and everything, are we concerned in what legacy we're going to be leaving behind for these children to pass to their children? Who are going to be the storytellers? Who are going to be the historians of the things that we're going to be leaving behind as we move forward? Thank you.
Okay. I think I want to, frankly, there are a lot of issues here that can be addressed, but I'm going to do just one. Let's look at local content. And what I keep saying is this. Again, besides digital technology, there's a lot that we can do with or without digital technology. And what I'm saying is this. If you look at the syllabus of integrated science in our curriculum, the issue is this. Why are we learning science as if it's a true and false, multiple choice, and wrong and right answers? What I'm advocating is this. We have to begin to look at the natural resources of Ghana and begin to see how we can direct science to add value to what it is that we have. That's number one. And the reason why I say that is that many times when I've gone around the country doing training, and especially in the north, where I'll give just one example, where you see cotton blowing everywhere. Why is that not incorporated as a scientific activity so that we can use science, science to process the cotton wool into textiles so that we can begin to do things with them? Especially if you go to the ministry of any ministry in this country, every curtain is imported. But the people in the north who have access to cotton, they are not being drawn into the curriculum. So what I'm saying is this. Science has to be purposeful. And we don't need digital technology for that unnecessarily. The last thing I also say is this. For example, if you look at a question that we were asked consistently when I was growing up, what is the largest man-made lake in the world? Obiaman and Sasso, the Volta Lake. What is it that we do the Volta Lake when we can have students have scientific applications growing tilapia there? Now we have others from different countries who come to do these things for us. So the local content matter is very, very important. Ghana has everything under the sun except the mindset and the science that will direct us to where we can add applications. And all of that has to be part and parcel of how we train teachers. And in fact, University of Cape Coast was set up just for that, to train teachers along scientific lines so we can begin to add value to what we have. We are importing everything, and frankly, it makes no sense whatsoever.
We mentioned teaching actively in the local context. Madam, how many ethic books? I know we have ethics from Akrofi, Crystal, whatever, from Akropong to the Kwauman. We have ethics. Our grandparents tell us how many are written. Yesterday, a young child accosted me and said, Mr. Fair, I signed up for digital books, but because I'm busy, I couldn't read enough, but they've charged me 75 CDs. Digital books, madam. Books are now more available through technology than published. In our libraries, we have technology in our libraries. We can research and do everything through thousands of books, going to other libraries, and so forth, and so on. So technology is important, but its use, we really must bring it into our context. You want to write about Northern ethics? How will I read about it unless it's readily available? So the reason why things have not changed is that you and I, actually, we have failed. We haven't done some things that other cultures have done in order to educate their children. Are we therefore surprised that all our children are applying to study abroad? Recently, in my old age, I'm beginning to appreciate education in our local context. I'm beginning to think that Africa must develop its own learning institutions based on our needs and our culture, like Ashesi, like ALU, and many more. Not the ones that are simply copying or borrowing from England and setting up space here and taking our money. We've got to begin to rethink, to rejuvenate our nation and our country, and our society.
I will only add that though the change may be slow, we can still get there. With technology, there's a strand known as digital citizenship, where children are taught the do's and don'ts of technology. Interestingly, in Ghana, we don't teach it. We started using technology before we realized, no, looking at what children were doing with the technology, how they were posting images, of other people, of themselves, and doing all sorts of things with technology. We stopped. We said, let us pause, go back and do the digital citizenship. So as a rule, before we encourage the use of any form of technology, for example, Google Classroom, we take children through the digital citizenship program so they understand the do's and don'ts of technology. So I think that if it's widespread, and if all institutions do this bit, educate the children in the do's and don'ts of it, then they can use it without any problems. And like she asked, all children love to use technology, all of them. The problem, however, is that some parents don't have it at home. So as for use of technology, the phones, the WhatsApps, the Google Hangouts, etc., all children love it. And so we can use that to encourage them to learn what we want them to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we give our panelists a hand? Thank you so much. So now, just before we wrap up, as Mr. Anis Hafa has mentioned, there's a video that we have to play to just highlight some of the ups of teacher training, especially in using the case study of Finland. So can we roll that video? Just before we wrap up, as Mr. Anis Hafa, just before. Play to just highlight some of the ups of teacher training, especially in using the case study of Finland. So can we roll that video?
About how people who tend to
just before we wrap up, as
I wanted to cite the example of Finland. In Finland, they select their best brains for teachers. If you are not brainy, you won't go there. But then the other thing is that they also train the teachers very, very well. In the work that I do, where I train teachers, you begin to realize that when young people, whether they wanted to come into education or not, begin to see that out of the training, they are raising their own status. They pay more attention to you because you are developing a human being. Teaching gives you the ability to be able to speak properly, to be able to communicate properly. Teaching gives you the ability to do presentations. It teaches you the ability to write properly and to relate to other human beings. These are some of the most sophisticated skills that anybody needs. And frankly, you can branch off from there into other areas, public relations, wherever you encounter human beings. But again, like I said, it depends on how important society itself values it. But I think the time has come. Because look at Ghana, 92,000 square miles or 280,000 square kilometers and so on. We have everything under the sun. The land is rich. But what I keep saying is that the land is rich, but the mindset is poor. So the important thing is that we begin to raise the quality of our thinking processes themselves. Key. And what does Finland have? They don't have diamonds. They don't have bauxite. They don't have a tropical climate where you can grow any fruit under the sun in the tropics. They don't have cocoa. But they know that. So what they've done is this. How can we use the grey matter to develop products? Now, look at Nokia. Finland was probably making more money from Nokia when Nokia was top of the line than all our natural resources put together without damaging the landscape. Where others have been successful, where they have longevity, where they have better healthcare, where they sleep better, where they eat better. That is speaking to us that at the end of the day, the important thing for every developing country is we want to develop the grey matter to the highest levels.
Thank you so much to everyone for sitting with us and having this incredibly insightful discussion into education. Just before we let everyone go and we invite our guest of honor up, we have, I believe, a gift for our panelists. You have
I want to have a last word as for teachers. Without teachers, education will be difficult, even in the age of AI. It's the most powerful job one can get in this world. Why? Think about it carefully. You can have control of your students' minds if you understand them well and they understand you. It's the most beautiful thing when your children can really appreciate your mind and you can appreciate theirs. And that's where development starts. It is said that we don't have enough teachers, so we begin to hire them left and right. But there are the people who are born with it. And no matter what the conditions are, they will do the work well. And those are the ones we want in our schools. Those who appreciate young people, who appreciate their minds and the capability that those minds can produce. It's a word I want to share with all of us. If we want to transform national teaching, that's where we have to begin. Understanding of our young people and their potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those wise words. So yes, can we have the gifts for our panelists? Oh, Mama Sue, may you give me some? Okay, can we give our panelists another hand as they exit the stage? Thank you. All right, we are coming almost to the end of our program. Just before we leave, we have a guest of honor amongst us. We talked about him earlier on today, Mr. Dos Santos, and we want to be able to have him give us some closing remarks to round out the day. So you're welcome, Mr. Dos Santos.
Good evening. Well, Kwesi, I don't feel qualified to comment on such high quality discussions that our panelists offered us. It is top of the range. So instead of commenting, I would perhaps want to add another aspect to the discussion. I think they all covered very well what should happen in the classroom. And I will leave that as they said. But I would like to reflect on education of the future in relation to the challenges that we face in the world. And that perhaps would go in line with some questions that were raised about the curricula and some questions that were raised about policy. I was introduced here as the representative of UNESCO. Dr. Ken, we at UNESCO have a lot in common with you here at TIS. You teach IB, the objective of which, I mean, the foundation of IB seeks to promote peace through education. We, as UNESCO, were created in 1946, just after Second World War II, and the charter that created us has a preamble, part of which reads, and I quote, "Since wars begin in the minds of men, capital men to mean men and women, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed." So in short, I would say that our mandate at UNESCO is similar to yours, to promote peace. And we do so through education, which is your focus, through science, culture, social and human science, and communication and information. Our theme today here is transforming world, school education of the future. I think if we approach this theme, we need to look at what are the challenges that we face today in the world, and what are the opportunities that exist that we can seize, so that then we can begin to think, how do we reshape education? Because the understanding that I had here is that we are educating, but things are not going so well. And here I must say that having come today here, having seen your school, having had the Kwesi as the master of ceremony, who is your alumni, having seen the girl that introduced us here, you are doing well. But it is not the same all in Ghana. And the lady, one lady that asked the question also commented that the numbers you produce are much less than the numbers that come from public education. If we cross the road here, we will see scores of youth disputing the narrow road with the cars. And those are symptoms that something is not well. And that thing we need to address. Let me turn to the challenges that I perceive as the key challenges we face, and the ones that should enlighten us as we think education of tomorrow. As I said, you, as well as us, were created to promote peace. But if we look at the map and we try to draw the geography of war of today, the picture is rather gloomy. We have war in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Palestine, DRC, South Sudan, Boko Haram in Nigeria. We have the threat of terrorism everywhere, even here. We have to be conscious that that threat exists. We have a rising violent extremism in the world. We have the problem of migration. Young people, including from Ghana, dying across, crossing the Sahara to go and see if they can cross the Mediterranean. And as they reach the Mediterranean, they also drown because the facilities they use are not good. We have the Trump administration with the new migration policies. And because immigration is towards Europe, we also have the European Union rethinking or implementing new migration policies. Trump got to the power saying he wants to make America great again. And that echo, we see it rising in many corners of the world. The rise of nationalism in a globalized world. We have a Brexit in the UK, and now we have a new phenomenon, one that is called economic war. So education of tomorrow should help us address these challenges. It is these challenges that should guide us as we reshape education. What are the opportunities that we can seize? Well, Africa is predicted, not predicted, actually they are almost accurate calculations. Africa by the year 2030 will have 1/4 of the world's youth population. That is a great asset in the sense that we will not be short of strong people to work, but it is also a challenge in the sense that we have to find work for them. We talked here about ICTs, technological changes. In short, the fourth revolution. And someone said the teacher might be replaced by computer, the looming artificial intelligence. You know, those are opportunities that if we don't seize them, then they become threats. Then they become threats. So in reshaping our education, we should look into that. But we have also a very good framework that was adopted by world leaders in 2030 agenda. And in that agenda, you know, education is key. Name one of the goals, and I will tell you that without education you cannot achieve it. That agenda talks about poverty eradication, prosperity, decent work, economic growth, addressing climate change and sustainability. Because unless there is enough for everyone, there will not be peace. At home, we used to say that at a home where there is no bread, everyone quarrels, but no one is right. It is the same with society. Let me now, to finalize, talk a little bit about what I think needs to be done in order to address these challenges. Note taken that I will not repeat what our colleague from Geneva said, nor what our colleagues in the panel did say. But I believe that we really need a paradigm shift in our education system. Look at Ghana. Look at Ghana. Everyone wants to have a white-collar job. No one wants something that creates wealth. And, you know, wealth is not created in your offices by white-collar people. Wealth is created by engineers, workers, miners, and so on. But if you look at the statistics here, looks like here in Ghana we train more social scientists, more lawyers than engineers, people in agriculture, and so on. I think we need to reshape our education system in such a way that it produces people that create wealth, not people that transact wealth. So I would say that while promoting all levels of education, education of tomorrow should prioritize skills development, should bring more of science and technology and mathematics, strengthen that element of the curriculum, science, technology, and mathematics. Critical thinking was already mentioned, so that we can then reap the dividends, the results of what is called the demographic dividend. Otherwise, the 1/4 young people that we will have in 2030 as compared to the world will not be a benefit but a curse. Education must depart from inculcating theories to teaching how to do. We have engineers that if this thing, they know exactly how this thing is done. They can tell the theories behind this. But if it breaks and we give him to repair it, he can't repair it. That should be addressed. We have graduates, our education system produces graduates that are job seekers instead of job creators. We produce graduates that seek jobs that do not exist. We should create graduates that can create jobs for themselves and for others. I think also in a consideration of what I said with regard to rising extremism as well as terrorism, we need to consider in our education a curriculum that brings the element of core values that will bring understanding amongst us. What I would call, or we call at UNESCO, global citizenship. Ladies and gentlemen, with the time that I have at my disposal, this is what I wanted to tell you. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dos Santos. Now, I must say this forum has been very insightful, even for me as a student, but I also think I was nodding a lot because I intend to work in education in the future. Now, having heard so many things, I've realized one thing, that education is not only restricted to merely classroom learning and academic stuff, but spills over into skills, creativity, and even the arts. Now, in line with this, TIS is a well of creativity with talented actors, orators, youthful dancers, skilled musicians. To attest to this fact, I have the pleasure of inviting some of our students to members of the school choir to delight us with a marvelous performance. So with a round of applause, shall we invite the school choir? Please be quiet. Thank you so much, the school choir. Now, as I stated earlier, we've been blessed today with so many distinguished guests, and one of such is Mr. Tiuso dos Santos, the head of UNESCO Ghana, and we would like to appreciate him with a gift. So, Mr. Dos Santos, can you kindly please join us on the stage? Thank you so much. Now, we'd also like to appreciate our moderator for today, who is not only so verbose, but he was able to facilitate such an organic conversation about education. I mean, he's a testament of the kind of exceptional students that TIS produces. So with a round of applause, can we invite Mr. Kwesi Edudako? Thank you so much. Now, to continue with the appreciation and acknowledgement, I'd like to thank the founding family for being here with us today. Mr. Hanis Afar, the chairman of the Board of Governors, Dr. and Mrs. Sylvia Boyd, the former advisor and member of the Board of Governors, and also Mr. Perry Okujato. Then We'd like to thank all panelists who joined us today. Some of you are heading later on this week to the IB conference in Vienna, but you made time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today, so we really appreciate you. Then also, we'd like to thank all parents who were here with us today, especially Mrs. Eddie Darko, the mother of the moderator. We'd also like to thank Mrs. Vivian Campbell, the principal of the Ghana Christian International High School. Then we'd also like to thank and appreciate all invited schools who joined us today: Brainy Burns School, Aves International, SOS, Calvary Presby Basic School, Tema Parents, and Don Bosco. Thank you so much. Now, as we're about to end, please take notes of the following announcements. Now, this week is our anniversary week in TIS, and it's packed with so many amazing events. I hope to see you all on Wednesday at 2 p.m. to celebrate our Founders Day with us, where we celebrate international mindedness. Then also, we'll continue the celebration on Saturday at 9 a.m. with a grand derby at the sports complex. Then we'll also continue on Sunday at 11 a.m. for the Thanksgiving service. Please make sure to be with us as we celebrate this week. And also, make sure to join us on the 23rd of November at the National Theatre, where TIS will hold its own adaptation of The Beauty and the Beast. This is definitely something you cannot miss. Then please note that there are exhibitions going on outside the MPH, where we will show the TIS journey, how far TIS has traveled in 15 years. Then we'll also showcase the future and the past of education. So please note that. Then also, there will be some interviews going on after the program, so kindly make yourselves available to the media houses. Then also, we will take some pictures after the program. The pictures will be taken inside the MPH, so please heed the instructions of the protocol team and remain seated after the program. Also note that after the pictures are taken, the protocol team will guide our special guests to the project center for a cocktail. Once again, thank you all for being present, and kindly remain seated until you are ushered out by members of the protocol team. Okay. We'd also like to appreciate some alumni that are amongst us here today: Apioko, Sean, and Cecilia. Can you please give them a round of applause? Thank you. Now with that, please listen to the order of the photography, and once you are called, please kindly mount the stage. Firstly, shall we invite our panelists and the founding family to come and take...
For me, the story of TIS started a little earlier than the famous 3rd October. Each time I look back vis-a-vis where we are now, I always see the awesomeness of God's hand on TIS. Once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the late Mr. Chairman for what you have allowed the good Lord to do through you. Long live TIS, and may God bless us all.
Continue to do so. God bless TIS. God bless us all. Thank you. Life is beautiful. I'm thankful to be one of the pioneer love of TIS, along with all of my friends.
But now there's so many resources for you to improve yourselves and even do much better than we did.
Where are my friends?